Hi. John Wesley Bready, page 185 of This Freedom Whence. Wesley also was a promoter of cooperative industry among the poor. He had no sympathy with an industrial procedure which, in the sweatshops of cellar and attic, or in the depths of the mine, could reduce the bodies of men, women, and children to walking skeletons, only to hurl them on the scrap heap when no longer the source of gain. His persistent teaching concerning the use and abuse of money contained a germinal answer to this inhumanity. But meantime, the slave trade had to be abolished, and the hour had not yet struck when Lord Shaftesbury would consecrate his life to the epic task of converting Parliament and emancipating the workers of industrial England. Wesley, the initial pioneer, had, in this sphere, to be content with doing what he could, as he could. But the problem he did not shirk. On November 25th, 1740, he wrote, "After several methods proposed for employing those who were out of business, we determined to make a trial of one which several of our brethren recommended. Our aim was, with as little expense as possible, to keep them at once from want and idleness, in order to which we took 12 of the poorest and a teacher into the society room, where they were employed for 4 months, till spring came on, in carding and spinning cotton. And the design answered. They were maintained with very little more than the produce of their own labor." End of quote. This was but one of Wesley's endeavors to provide wholesome, remunerative employment for the needy. His efforts extended to women as well as men. His journal, May 7th, 1741, reads, quote, "My design, I told them, is to employ, for the present, all the women who are out of business, and desire it, in knitting. To these we will give first the common price for what work they do, and then add according as they need. 12 persons were appointed to inspect these, and to visit and provide things necessary for the sick." End of quote. The chief value of Wesley's industrial undertakings, however, lies not in the size of his experiments, nor in their material success, but in the spirit by which he approached the problems involved. To him, such industrial terms as hand and boss were pagan and degrading. Unswervingly did he believe in the nobility of toil and the fraternity of man. All faithful workers to him were honorable, while no one commanded his respect who did not engage in some creative service for the common weal. For idleness and arrogance he could not cloak his contempt, and that perhaps is the reason his journal is replete with reference to the great vulgar and to the gross ignorance and paganism he had so often observed among the rich and genteel. Polite triflers were Wesley's chief aversion. Never did he hear the modern maxim, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his need." Yet his example and teaching endorsed the principle therein implied. Wesley's Benevolent Loan Fund and his Strangest Friends Society are especially interesting. Always he strove to stimulate initiative and independence in the underprivileged, and social responsibility in the privileged. These two schemes are symptomatic of that double aim. In January 1748 he wrote, "I made a public collection towards a lending stock for the poor. Our rule is to lend only 20 shillings at once, which is repaid weekly within 3 months. I began this about a year and a half ago. £30, 16 shillings were then collected, and out of this no less than 255 persons have been relieved in 18 months. End of quote. By later collections, the capital of this fund was raised in 1772 to £120, and the borrowing limit to £5, and certain business romances owe their origin to its initial aid. The Strangest Friends Society was one of the last of Wesley's social creations. Not till 1787 was it founded, and yet prior to Wesley's death it had its branches throughout the country. A journal memo of 1790 explains its purpose. Quote, "In the morning I met the Strangers' Society, instituted wholly for the relief not of our society, but of poor, sick, friendless strangers. I do not know that I ever heard or read of such an institution till within a few years ago." So this also is one of the fruits of Methodism." End of quote. Without the new humanity created by this revival, the selfless efforts of this society would have been unthinkable. Yet by the turn of the century, public tributes were being paid to its work. "This society," says J. Smith's History of Liverpool, that is in 1810, "this society originated among the Methodists of this town, and it is in great measure supported by them. The principles upon which it rests are liberal in the extreme, and reflect the greatest honor on the sect. It includes the wretched of every religious persuasion except their own, who are relieved from another fund. The only recommendation is distress." We'll put a link into The Destructive Effects of the Industrial Revolution, a video on Rauschenbusch.